even though it's not anything about their fault from how they produce the coffee. So this is something that I wanted to address and change and use some of the skills that we developed over the time that I've had in coffee to try and make it easier and also more accessible. So just go to the next one. So things that I asked in this kind of question of this journey is, are we focusing too much emphasis on the Western market? Are we creating accessible tools? And how do we get the knowledge and necessary skills down to anyone who purchases a machine? I found that there was 4 key problems that we needed to address when developing and creating the Link project. The main one that I wanted to do is accessibility. The thing that frustrated me in coffee and with roasting is there's so many great machines on the market. When I was looking at what was available, you have such a plentiful abundance of choice. But it doesn't matter how much you spend on a roaster or how good it is in its functionality. It still doesn't allow you to have the skill set in order to operate it correctly. So I wanted to find a way in which we could systemize roasting that regardless of skill set, whether you're new to roasting or you have a lot of experience in roasting, that you could jump in and through a system that was practical, have the ability to roast your samples regardless of your knowledge. The second big thing that I wanted to target was affordability. So most of the time, a great piece of equipment does cost quite a lot of money. In some of the areas that need sample roasting, it simply was not affordable. So the idea was they would either go to a cooperative or a roast master where they'd have to collectively wait for their samples to be produced, or they would have to turn to alternate methods which were simply not representing their coffee in a correct way. The third main thing was practicality. Things that I wanted to look at and address was how do we look to challenge and question some of the obstacles in roasting. So there's been a lot of progression, but I'm not sure if anyone in this group would agree with me, but there also felt to be a little bit of a plateau, that some of the aspects of coffee roasting, some of the challenges, some of the things which make day-to-day production or sampling a little difficult were almost just accepted as this is the reality of coffee roasting. They won't change. So I wanted to question, can we ask and dive into aspects and see, can they be done better? And the last part of Link project and problems that I saw that I wanted to address was simply education. I find that myself, I've been blessed with quite a good coffee career. I've been roasting for 15 years. I would say I roasted terrible coffee for 7 of those 15 years, but by learning and having the chance to make a mistake, I could understand the outcome and guide my direction a little bit better when it came to preparing roasts and understanding how to work with different coffees. What I wanted to do with this project is I've always been, as I said, so thankful for my career that if I can leave the industry in a better place than it started through allowing people to understand roasting a little bit better, then I'll be happy and sleep better at night. And this is why we love doing these webinars, because it's a great chance to just talk through ideas and concepts and how we see roasting. I will say that some of the theories and concepts we present to you today are our understanding of how we work with coffee. The beautiful thing about coffee is there's not one right way that you can approach it. It's all about how you construct the puzzle pieces of the different variables together in order to get that outcome. And some of the things that would hopefully allow you to see as we progress and do more of these classes is how you yourself can manipulate all of those little variables in order to get a more successful outcome. So this is the roadmap of the Link. We focused originally on targeting the traveler, buyer, coffee buyer, producers at origin. And then we've really started to evolve where the Link system can be. You're seeing it now with home enthusiasts. You're seeing it with independent cafes doing cafe service roast to order. We had a fantastic event in Sydney a few days ago where we showed the concept that roasting is now something that doesn't need to happen back of house a few days in advance before you can serve it. It can actually be something where you can prepare coffee to order and manage your not only your cost of goods a little bit better, but also give the customer a experience and insight that allows them more appreciation of coffee. And another big focus for us was working on the competitor, the person who spends a lot of money on coffee, wants to get the best expression, and how do we allow the roaster to deliver the quality that they're looking for in the system. So when we were developing this project, the first thing that we wanted to see was, can it produce quality? And the best test that we had was, we need to take this roaster to the World Barista Championships or Brewers Cup and get some feedback. Throughout my career, how we've developed our understanding of coffee is using those competitions as a great feedback tool. And that allows you to shape and refine the way in which you prepare your coffees. In 2021, we'd finally got the prototype ready for Link, and we started preparing those coffees. We worked with 2 independent baristas, and surprisingly, we had a fantastic result. So we knew that we could develop the quality that we want out of the roaster, but the idea was, how do we allow people to utilize it in the same way that I do? Going back a little bit, a lot of you will see the roaster as, well, there's the Cafe Logic Nano and the Link. How does this relationship work? When I was moving away from being in a fixed roastery, I was looking for an alternate. I connected with a gentleman who's in this call, Wayne, through a mutual friend, and he sent me a sample of the original Nano. And this is a fantastic bit of equipment, and you'll notice that we share pretty much the same hardware for the Link project. What I also understood in this is that was designed for a particular purpose in a particular market, and it does that function really well. But when we want to apply the uses and some of the aspects to a more commercial setting, for sampling, for coffee buying, for competitions, there's features and aspects that a professional or more someone in the coffee industry would want certain features in order to be able to control it a little bit better. So we came with the team with a pitch in order to develop a concept that we would take that existing hardware and look to evolve and build on it in order to give the functionality, the quality, and the controls that someone who is using it in their everyday, more professional coffee setting would like to be able to get the outcomes that they want. I want to run you guys through a little bit of the core operation of the Link in order to make it a little bit clearer to how it works, how we've designed it, and also some of the key aspects that make it quite unique. So the first thing is providing the tools to known obstacles. So one of the things that I first wanted to challenge and we wanted to work on is understanding what is portability and how do we address it. And that's focusing on what we call the altitude calibration. So something that I noticed is there are other roasters on the market that you can pack them in your suitcase, you can take them to a new location, you can plug them in and you can start roasting. And to most people, they're very happy with that degree of portability. The frustration that I had is working with high-level competitors for around 8 years. We would travel to a new country. We would have spent 4, 5, 6 months developing a particular profile for that roaster, for that competitor, sorry. They would get to that country, plug in the roaster, start roasting, and then because of the environmental conditions, all of that profiling work that we'd done basically went in the bin. The very hard thing to understand is roasting isn't so much about what's happening in the machine, but also the environmental factors of where you're roasting, especially when you have electricity, different altitude, different air densities, different moistures in the air will drastically affect the way in which a coffee will roast. And for me, I wanted to change that. If we want profile sharing and the ability for people to have a great system, we want to make sure that there is some degree of it being easier for the user to not have to worry and customize and edit profiles because they're simply moving location. I also wanted to open up a more honest feedback loop from someone who has purchased a coffee from a producer and a producer, and if they had the same machine and they were roasting the same sample, they would be able to actually see the same expression of the coffee. This led us to developing what we now call altitude calibration. So the way in which I thought about it is, in the past, what we had done is we'd always adapted our roast profiles to where we took the roaster. And I was in a pretty headset mind of, how about we do this in reverse? When we take our roaster to a different location, how about we adjust the calibration and the settings of the roaster so that when you plug it in and start roasting, internally what's happening in that chamber, it mimics and thinks that it's at the same environmental conditions or temperatures, or altitudes as when you started or developed that profile. This is a pretty long and arduous task. Developing the algorithm that would allow this calibration, I think, took me around 7 weeks, 5 different countries, 120 different farms, and I think we had 60 or 70 different elevations. We're also testing different power voltages and how that would affect. What we learned is there was a lot of impact on how you went up in altitude that would not only affect the movement of the coffee, but also the boiling point and cracking temperatures. And what we looked to standardize in the system was by setting a particular setting in the roaster, that the roaster itself would always think that it's roasting at sea level. And the great thing about this is, if it always thinks it's roasting at sea level, rather than if you're at, maybe Sydney, here I'm at 2 or 20 meters above sea level. I've roasted in Bolivia at 4,000 meters. I've roasted in Guatemala City at 1,500 meters, and largely use the exact same profiles that's recommended by the system. And this is fantastic because it gives you ease of use and that true sharing. And I think it's one of those nice things that you don't need to consistently do every day. Once you get a new link, you pop in your meters above sea level on the side, tells you your setting, and it will save and be remembered until you take it to a new location. The next aspect of knowing obstacles is, even if we develop a profiling system which will allow the user to find a profile and get a recommendation, I am very aware that sometimes it cannot go exactly correct. And we didn't want to just have a system that recommended profile, and when it wasn't to the user's taste or it didn't roast correctly in the system, that it would not be able to be corrected fast, which is why we developed the advanced dial-in function. This one is a feature that I think a lot of people don't quite realize. But when you go through some of the profiling attributes, which I will later on, you'll see why it's such an important tool in developing a more successful roast from that initial roast that you've done. But this tool is essentially to guide you that if you're using a particular coffee, it's selected a roast plan, a power curve, you've roasted it, and a first crack has occurred at a particular time. The only data point that we haven't collected prior to roasting is that exact first crack. We have a pretty good estimate based on our data and how we've driven the link of where that coffee will crack, what temperature that coffee will crack. But some coffees, just because of process or how they are, sit outside of the standard data range that we do have. The nice thing about this feature is you can simply select the roast plan that you've used, enter the true cracking time and the profile that you utilize, and it will give you a recommendation of, if you want a optimized roast that's going to successfully hit all of the percentages of dry, Maillard, and development phase correctly, I would recommend using this setting. So essentially, in 2 roasts, your first roast and your second roast, you'll have a perfect dial-in.